I emasculated my boyfriend publicly the moment I earned more than him. He left without a word, stopped paying every bill he once covered, and the woman who mocked him for being broke is now drowning in debt alone. I got a collections call at 7 a.m. on a Wednesday for a credit card I forgot existed. Balance was $14,200. Minimum payment 90 days overdue. The woman on the phone said, "Would you like to set up a payment arrangement?" I said I'd call back. I didn't call back. I put the phone on the counter and stared at the ceiling fan in an apartment I can barely afford and tried to figure out how I got here. I know how I got here. I opened my mouth at a dinner party and the man who'd been quietly holding my life together for 4 years decided he'd heard enough. His name is Wesley. And if you're imagining some fragile ego guy who couldn't handle his girlfriend's success, you can stop. That's the story I told for 6 months after he left. She outturned him and his ego couldn't take it. That's what I told my friends. That's what I told my mother. That's what I told the mirror every morning while I was slowly drowning in bills he used to pay without being asked. The truth is uglier. The truth is I got a promotion and turned it into a weapon and used it to gut the man who spent 4 years making sure I never worried about a single thing. And he didn't yell. He didn't argue. He didn't slam a door. He just stopped. Everything. All at once. And left me standing in the middle of a life I couldn't afford because I never realized how much of it he was funding. Let me tell you about Wesley. Wesley worked as a logistics coordinator at a shipping company. Salary was around $52,000. Not flashy. Not impressive at dinner parties. Not the kind of number you brag about. He drove a Nissan Altima he bought used and maintained himself. He wore the same rotation of clothes for 3 years. He cut his own hair with clippers in the bathroom every 2 weeks. He packed lunch every single day. Turkey sandwich. Apple. Water bottle. Same thing. Monday through Friday. He was careful with money. Not cheap. Careful. There's a difference I didn't understand until he was gone. When we moved in together after year 1, he said, "Let me handle the rent. You cover groceries and your car. I'll take care of the rest." I said, "That's not fair. You'd be paying more." He said, "I make more right now. It makes sense. When that changes, we'll adjust." He paid rent. $1,850 a month. He paid electricity, water, internet, renter's insurance. He paid for dinner when we went out, which wasn't often because he preferred cooking at home. He cooked most nights. Not because I asked. Because he got home first and said it didn't make sense for both of us to be tired and hungry. He set up an automatic transfer into a joint savings account. $300 a month from his check. He said, "This is for emergencies. Or a house someday. Whichever comes first." He never talked about any of this. Never mentioned what he paid. Never itemized it. Never held it over me. Never said, "I cover the rent so you should do this." It was invisible. The way load-bearing walls are invisible. You don't see them. You just live inside the structure they hold up. And you assume the ceiling stays up on its own. I was making $41,000 when we moved in together. Account specialist at a mid-size ad agency. I covered groceries. My car payment. My student loans. My phone bill. That was my contribution. Everything else was Wesley. I didn't think about it. That's the honest truth. I didn't sit down and add up what he paid versus what I paid. I didn't calculate the difference. I just lived in a comfortable apartment with the lights on and the Wi-Fi working and dinner on the table and never once asked myself who was making that possible. Year 2. I got a raise. $47,000. I told Wesley. He said, "That's great, babe." Took me to dinner to celebrate. Paid the check. Year 3. Another raise. $53,000. Now I was making roughly what he made. I told Wesley. He said, "Amazing. You're catching up." He smiled when he said it. Not competitive. Proud. We were making the same money and he was still paying 70% of the bills. I didn't offer to restructure. He didn't ask. The arrangement continued because it worked and because Wesley never made me feel like I owed him anything. Year 4. The promotion. Director of Client Strategy. $78,000. Salary jumped $25,000 in one move. Biggest career moment of my life. I was 29 years old and making more money than anyone in my family ever had. I called my mom first. She screamed. I called my best friend Janae. She screamed. I called Wesley. He said, "I'm so proud of you, Danny. I always knew this was coming. Let's celebrate this weekend." He was proud. Genuinely. Without a trace of insecurity. Without a flicker of resentment. He was happy because the woman he loved had achieved something big. That's it. That's all he felt. What I felt was different. I felt powerful. Not just accomplished. Powerful. Like something shifted in my body chemistry. Like I'd been walking through a door my whole life and suddenly I was carrying the keys. I started seeing everything differently. My apartment. My clothes. My social circle. My boyfriend. Wesley making $52,000 didn't bother me on Tuesday when I was making $53,000. By Friday, when my new contract was signed at $78,000, I looked at his Nissan in the parking lot and thought, we need to talk about upgrading that. I didn't say it out loud. Not yet. But the thought existed. And thoughts like that don't stay quiet. They metastasize. Janae was the accelerant. She made $91,000 in pharmaceutical sales. Her boyfriend drove a BMW. They took trips. She never said anything directly about Wesley. She didn't have to. She'd just show me photos of her weekend in Savannah and say, Terrell surprised me. She'd mention the restaurant Terrell took her to. She'd casually reference Terrell's bonus. I started doing math I'd never done before. Wesley's salary versus mine. The gap was $26,000. That gap sat in my head like a splinter. I couldn't stop touching it. 3 weeks after the promotion. Saturday. Wesley and I were at a dinner party at Janae's apartment. 6 couples. Nice place. Wine. Appetizers on a marble island. The kind of gathering where people talk about vacations and promotions and cars. Someone asked me about work. I told them about the promotion. People clapped. Congratulations. That's amazing. Janae said, tell them the salary. I should have said, that's personal. I should have changed the subject. I should have done what Wesley would have done, which is smile and say, she's killing it. That's all you need to know. But I didn't have Wesley's discipline. I had 3 glasses of wine and a new sense of power and a room full of people looking at me like I just climbed a mountain. I said the number. $78,000. More clapping. Someone said, what does Wesley do again? And this is where I did it. The thing that ended everything. The thing I replay every night in this apartment that I'm 3 months behind on. I said, Wesley is in logistics. He makes about 52. I said it with a smile. And then I said, so I guess I'm the breadwinner now? I laughed. Some people laughed. Janae laughed loudest. Wesley didn't laugh. I looked at him. He was holding a glass of wine. His face hadn't changed. He didn't look angry. He didn't look embarrassed. He looked like someone who'd just received information. Like a doctor reading a chart. Processing. Filing. He said nothing. Then someone said, oh man, Wesley, she's going to be running the house now. Another laugh. And I said, I mean someone has too. The room laughed again. Except Wesley. And except Terrell. I noticed that later. When I replayed it. Terrell didn't laugh either. Terrell looked at Wesley the way men look at each other when one of them is being publicly disrespected and both of them know it. Wesley set his glass down. He said, I'm going to get some air. He walked to the balcony. Alone. I didn't follow him. I stayed in the circle. Soaking it in. The attention. The power. The feeling of being the successful one in the room. I'd never been the successful one before. Wesley had always been the stable one. The reliable one. The one people asked about because he fixed things and helped people move and showed up for everything. Now I was the one getting attention. And I loved it. And I chose the attention over the man standing alone on the balcony. 20 minutes later, Wesley came back inside. He said, ready to go? I said, sure. We drove home. Quiet car. He didn't play music, which was unusual. He always played music in the car. I said, you okay? He said, yeah. Tired. He wasn't tired. He was making a decision. I didn't know that yet. Sunday. Normal. He cooked breakfast. We did laundry. He went to the hardware store to get a filter for the kitchen sink. Normal Wesley things. Quiet. Present. Monday I came home from work and his closet was half empty. Not all empty. Half. He'd taken his clothes. His toiletries. His books. His toolbox. The coffee maker he'd brought when we moved in. His grandmother's cast iron skillet that he cooked with every Sunday morning. No note. No text. No voicemail. No explanation. I called him. Straight to voicemail. Texted. No response. Called again. Nothing. I called Janae. I said, Wesley's stuff is gone. She said, what do you mean gone? I said, half his closet is empty. His things are gone. She said, did you guys fight? I said, no. She said, that's weird. Maybe he just needs space. Space. For what? We didn't fight. We didn't argue. We had a normal weekend. I couldn't figure it out. Tuesday. The electricity bill autopay bounced. I checked. Wesley had removed himself from the utility account. His name was gone. Wednesday. The landlord's office called. They said, Ms. Turner. We received notice that Wesley Odom is being removed from the lease effective the end of the month. You'll need to sign a new agreement as sole tenant or provide a cosigner. $1,850 a month. By myself. On a salary that was high but not $1,850 plus everything else high. Not when I had student loans. A car payment. Credit cards I'd been floating because I never had to worry about rent. Thursday. Internet disconnected. His name. His account. Gone. Friday. I logged into the joint savings account. The $300 monthly transfer had been canceled. His portion. $16,400 of the $22,000 balance had been withdrawn. His contributions. Calculated to the dollar. He didn't take my money. He took his. Every cent accounted for. Every withdrawal matched to his deposits. Precise. Methodical. The way Wesley did everything. I sat on the couch in a suddenly expensive apartment with no internet and a pending electricity reconnection fee and realized something that should have been obvious from the start. I couldn't afford my own life. The life I'd been living for 4 years was Wesley's architecture. He built it. He maintained it. He funded it. And I lived in it and never once said thank you and then publicly announced to a room full of strangers that I was the breadwinner while he was standing right there. $78,000 sounds like a lot until you subtract $22,800 in annual rent. $3,600 in utilities. $600 in renter's insurance. $6,000 in groceries Wesley used to split generously toward his side. $2,400 in dinners he covered. $3,600 he put into savings. Wesley was quietly spending over $39,000 a year on our shared life. Almost his entire take-home. For me. For us. And I stood in a room full of people and said, I guess I'm the breadwinner now. About a man who was spending every dollar he earned to make sure I was comfortable. I tried calling him for 2 weeks. Nothing. Voicemail was full by day 4. I drove to his buddy Corey's apartment because I knew they were close. Corey opened the door. Looked at me. Not hostile. Just blank. I said, is Wesley here? He said, no. I said, do you know where he is? He said, yeah. I said, can you tell me? He said, no. I said, Corey? Please. I just want to talk to him. Corey leaned on the door frame. He said, Danny. I'm going to say this once. Wesley called me Sunday morning after that dinner party. He told me what you said. He told me you announced his salary to a room full of people and called yourself the breadwinner. He said he sat on the balcony for 20 minutes and you didn't come check on him. Not once. I said, I didn't realize. Corey said, he cried on my couch. Wesley. The man who helped me move 3 times. Who drove my sister to the airport at 4 a.m. Who spent his Saturday fixing my garbage disposal. That man sat on my couch and said, she looked at me like I was less. In front of everyone. And she laughed. She laughed. Same words. Same wound. Same man who gives everything and gets mocked for it. Corey said, he's not coming back, Danny. He told me he can't be with someone who sees his value in dollars. He said he spent 4 years making sure you never stressed about money and you repaid him by turning his salary into a punchline at a dinner party. I said, it was a joke. Corey said, it wasn't funny. And you know it wasn't funny because you didn't make the joke when you were making less. You only made it when you were making more. That tells you everything about why you said it. That sentence. You only made the joke when you were making more. He was right. When Wesley earned more than me, I never once joked about it. Never once announced his salary. Never once said, I guess he's the breadwinner. Because when he was earning more, it felt like security. When I was earning more, it felt like power. And I weaponized it. Month 2 without Wesley. The bills started piling. Rent. Electricity. Internet. Renter's insurance. All on me. Plus my car. Plus my loans. Plus 2 credit cards I'd been minimum paying because I never had to worry about the big expenses. Now the big expenses were mine and the minimums weren't getting paid. $78,000 gross. After taxes, roughly $58,000 take home. Monthly, that's about $4,800. Rent, $1,850. Car payment, $420. Student loans, $380. Phone, $85. Insurance, $130. Utilities, $290. Internet, $75. Groceries, $500. Gas, $200. Credit card minimums, $340. Total, $4,270. Leaves $530 for everything else. Clothes. Toiletries. Any unexpected expense. Any emergency. Wesley had been absorbing $2,700 a month in shared costs. When that disappeared, my $78,000 salary became a survival budget. The breadwinner was broke. Month 3. I told Janae. She said, "Girl, just find a roommate." I said I didn't want a roommate. She said, "Then ask your mom." I said my mom lives in a 2-bedroom with my younger sister. There's no room. Janae said, he's kind of overreacting, right? It was just a joke. And for the first time I heard Janae the way Wesley must have heard her. As the person who laughed loudest. As the person who created the environment where I felt comfortable humiliating my boyfriend. As the person who said, "Tell them the salary." She lit the match. I threw it. But she lit it. I said, "It wasn't a joke, Janae." I told a room full of people that my boyfriend made less than me and acted like I'd won something. While he was standing right there. After he'd spent 4 years paying for the life I was bragging about. She got quiet. Then she said, "You were just celebrating." I said, "I was celebrating at his expense." Literally. I was standing in an apartment he paid for, wearing clothes I could afford because he covered every other bill, and I called myself the breadwinner. That's not celebration. That's delusion. She didn't know what to say. We talked less after that. Not because of a fight. Because I couldn't be around someone who made me worse. Janae made me worse. The same way I made Wesley feel less. Proximity to cruelty is still cruelty. Month 4. The joint savings account closed automatically when the balance hit zero on my side. The $5,600 that was mine went to a credit card payment and 1 month of rent. Gone in 3 weeks. I started eating rice and eggs for dinner. Not as a diet. Because a cart of real groceries was $200 and I couldn't swing it and make rent the same month. I looked at the kitchen one night. The burner where Wesley's cast iron skillet used to sit was empty. He made eggs every Sunday morning. Scrambled with chives and cheddar. He'd put them on a plate and bring them to me in bed. Not on special occasions. Every Sunday. For 4 years. That man brought me breakfast in bed 200 times, and I told a room full of strangers he made 52. Month 5. I ran into Wesley's coworker Linda at a coffee shop. She said, "Hey Danny. How are you?" I said, "I'm okay." She said, "I heard you and Wesley split." "I'm sorry. He's a great guy." I said, "He is." She said, "You know he got promoted, right?" I said, "What?" She said, "Yeah. About a month ago. Operations manager. Big bump. I think he's around 71 now. Maybe higher. He's been killing it. They love him there. $71,000. Wesley got promoted. The man who made $52,000 when I mocked him was now at $71,000. The gap I turned into a weapon had narrowed to $7,000. And it would keep narrowing. Because Wesley was the kind of person who got promoted. Not because he was loud. Because he was reliable. Because he showed up. Because he did the work without needing the applause. And I was the kind of person who got a promotion and used it to publicly humiliate the man who helped her get there. Month 6. I broke. Not dramatically. Quietly. The Wesley way. I was sitting on the kitchen floor because the couch reminded me of watching movies with him, and the bed reminded me of Sunday eggs, and the table reminded me of him paying bills on his laptop while I scrolled my phone. The kitchen floor was the only space that didn't have his ghost in it. I called my mother. I said, "Mom, I messed up." She said, "I know, baby. I've been waiting for you to call." I said, "You knew?" She said, "Danny. When you told me Wesley left, I asked you what happened. You said he couldn't handle your success. I asked you 3 times if there was more to the story. You said no 3 times. Then your sister told me what Janae told her about the dinner party." I said, "What did she say?" She said you announced his salary to a room full of people and said you were the breadwinner. And laughed. And he walked out to the balcony alone and you didn't go after him. My mother paused. Then she said, "Your father made less than me for 11 years. You know what I never did? Not once. I never made him feel small for it. Because the size of a man's paycheck has nothing to do with the size of what he gives. Wesley gave you everything. And you measured him by the one thing that didn't matter." I said, "I know." She said, "Do you? Because knowing and doing are different things. You knew Wesley was good. You knew he paid for everything. You knew he loved you. And you still stood in that room and turned him into a number. Knowing doesn't protect people from you if you don't act on it." I said, "What do I do?" She said, "First you survive. You pay your bills. You fix your budget. You learn what things cost. Not in dollars. In people. You learn what Wesley cost you. And then maybe, you become the kind of person who deserves what he was offering. But you don't chase him. You don't call him. You don't show up at his door. You fix yourself first. Everything else is just begging." Month 8. I got a second job. Weekends at a catering company. $18 an hour. Serving food at events. The irony of serving appetizers at dinner parties after what happened at one was not lost on me. First event. Corporate holiday party. I'm carrying a tray of bruschetta through a crowd of people in suits. A woman stopped me and said, "These are delicious." I said, "Thank you." She said, "What do you do full-time?" I said, "I work in advertising." She said, "Oh, fun." I smiled. I wanted to say, "I make $78,000 a year and I'm serving you bruschetta because I destroyed the man who made my life affordable and now I work weekends to cover the rent he used to pay without blinking." But I didn't. I just carried the tray and refilled the champagne and collected my $18 an hour. Month 10. Terrell texted me. Janae's boyfriend. The one who didn't laugh at the dinner party. He said, "Danny, I'm texting you because I think you should hear this from someone who was in that room. Wesley called me after the dinner. We're not close but we have a mutual respect thing. He asked me one question. He said, 'Did I imagine it or did she really do that?' I said, 'She did it.' He said, 'Thanks. That's all I needed.'" Terrell said, "That man didn't need me to confirm what happened. He needed me to confirm that he wasn't crazy for being hurt by it. Because somewhere in 4 years of being your safety net you'd convinced him that his feelings were less important than yours. And when he finally felt something that hurt he had to call another man to make sure he was allowed to feel it. He had to call another man to make sure he was allowed to feel hurt. By something I did. In public. While laughing." Terrell said, "I told Janae that night that what you did was wrong. She said I was overreacting. She said it was a joke. I said, if you announced my salary at a dinner party and called yourself the breadwinner in front of my friends I'd be gone before the check came." She got quiet. We had a long conversation that night about respect. And I want you to know that conversation happened because of what I saw done to Wesley. What you did to him changed how Janae and I talk about money. So something good came from it. Just not for you. Something good came from it. Just not for you. 7 words that summarized my entire situation. Month 12. 1 year without Wesley. I was current on rent. Barely. The catering job covered the gap. I'd paid down one credit card. The other was still at $11,000. Student loans were in forbearance. I hadn't bought new clothes in 9 months. My car needed brakes and I was waiting until next month. $78,000 a year. 2 jobs. Rice and eggs 3 nights a week. That's what the breadwinner's life looked like without the man she mocked. My sister called and said, "I saw Wesley at the farmer's market." I said, "How did he look?" She said, "Good. Really good." "He was with someone?" My stomach dropped. She said, "I didn't get a name." She seemed nice. They were laughing about something. He looked relaxed. Happy. Like the Wesley from before. The Wesley from before. Before me. Before I made him into a punchline. Before I taught him that the woman who was supposed to love him would measure him in dollars the moment she had more of them. She said, "Danny. He looked like himself. Whatever you took from him he got it back." I said, "Good." I didn't mean it. Not all the way. Part of me was gutted. Part of me wanted him to be miserable. To be sitting on a kitchen floor like me. Missing what we had. But that's the thing about Wesley. He doesn't sit on kitchen floors. He packs his things. He calculates his withdrawals to the penny. He removes himself cleanly. And he moves on. Because Wesley doesn't waste time mourning people who don't value him. He just stops showing up for them and starts showing up for himself. That's the lesson. The one I'm still learning at midnight on this kitchen floor with an empty burner where a cast iron skillet used to be. Wesley showed up for me every single day for 4 years. He showed up with rent checks and turkey sandwiches and Sunday eggs and a savings account and a quiet, steady presence that I mistook for lack of ambition because I didn't understand that discipline is ambition. That consistency is success. That a man who manages his money carefully enough to fund an entire household on $52,000 a year is not a man who lacks drive. He's a man who's already mastered something most people never learn. And I walked into a room full of people and reduced him to a number. I make $78,000. I work 2 jobs. I eat rice and eggs. I haven't been on a date in a year. My credit score dropped 140 points. The collections agency calls every Wednesday at 7 a.m. I can't afford the apartment Wesley used to pay for. I'm moving to a studio next month. $1,100. No balcony. No dishwasher. No Wesley on the couch watching a documentary with his feet on the coffee table asking if I want popcorn. He's at a farmer's market with someone who probably never announced his salary to a room full of strangers. My mother said something last week that I keep replaying. She said, there are men who show love loudly. Flowers. Trips. Surprises. Those are easy to see. Then there are men who show love quietly. Bills paid. Food cooked. Savings built. Problems fixed before you know they exist. Those men are invisible until they're gone. And then the whole house falls down and you stand in the rubble wondering who was holding it up. Wesley was holding it up. The whole time. And I couldn't see it because his love didn't make noise. It made structure. And I mistook the structure for mine. I guess I'm still the breadwinner. I earn more than he did when he left. I just can't afford anything. Turns out the bread doesn't matter if you burn down the table you were supposed to share it on.